You might think of Shadow Pokemon as like the forgotten child of Pokemon lore, some relic of the Gamecube games over 2 decades ago, but you're wrong. While there seems to be so little in the main canon, in the main continuity, there is so much outside that I have now drawn together for this video to give you the ultimate Shadow Pokemon deep dive, including how it still seems to keep appearing even right into modern day. By the end of this video, you will know all of the lore when it comes to Savage, Dark, and Shadow Pokemon throughout the franchise's history, and all the legends, the theories that the community, including myself, have come up with over the years. Oh, and please do be on the lookout for this mysterious creature. It doesn't look nice when it's turned corrupted. The lore of Shadow Pokemon dates back much earlier than this, but I want to start with Pokemon Colosseum because it's the game that most people are familiar with when it comes to this topic. Shadow Pokemon can be found in this game in the possession of other trainers. You catch them from those trainers by snagging, or to be quite frank, stealing them using a snag machine. There are about 50 Shadow Pokemon that need saving across the Orre region, and to the naked eye they look like regular Pokemon. However, there is one character, Rui, your companion through the game, who can sense a shadowy aura about them and identify them. In Gale of Darkness, the protagonist can do this, Michael, but uses some technology to be able to observe this aura. Perhaps this is similar to the aura that Lucario senses and other Aura Guardians sense around all living beings, but clearly something is wrong with it. This aura is corrupt. The Pokemon themselves are not happy, sometimes attacking their human trainer and entering hyper mode, and their attacks are all lost. Instead, they can only use the move Shadow Rush, a move that inflicts recoil damage onto them. Shadow Pokemon can't even level up. They can gain experience, but that experience is locked away, as is the door to their heart. Each Shadow Pokemon has a Shadow gauge, and as you reduce that gauge by using the Pokemon in battle, calling it out of hyper mode, and training it properly, the way a Pokemon should be trained, well, then it might finally be ready for purification. Purification can be done in one of 2 ways in Pokemon Colosseum and Gale of Darkness. One is in Agate Village, a very sacred place to the Orre region. Celebi seems to have a connection to the area, and this place, despite the desolate wasteland that the region is overflowing with lush green vines and trees. Tree, really. One big tree at the heart of the region. It's clearly a sacred place to the mythology of the land. Here, a Pokemon that has been through that process of becoming Shadow and had the Shadow gauge emptied can finally regain the experience lost through its proper training and become a regular Pokemon. And much like the visor that allows Michael to see the Shadow aura, technology has caught up and a lab in the region has created an artificial purification machine. It's a good thing they did, because in Pokemon Gale of Darkness, there is another Shadow project, XD001, the first of its kind, the unstoppable, unpurifiable, according to its creator, the Cipher admin Lavrina, Shadow Pokemon. A Lugia once upon a time, but not called Lugia by any of the characters that talk about it. They just talk about it as XD001. This is their perfect Shadow Pokemon project. In this game as well, the Shadow Pokemon have a wider range of Shadow moves, suggesting that the technology has come a little bit further in the 5 years between the 2 games. I want to talk a little bit about the games and about the story itself, because I think it's fundamental to understanding what Shadow Pokemon are all about. Who is Cipher? Who is this organization that's making this corrupting Pokemon technology? Team Cipher, or as they're known in Japan, Team Shadow, they're literally the Shadow team, are run by, well, actually a few different people. There are a number of admins across the game and high-ranking members, one of which is the delightful Mirror B. And in Pokemon Colosseum, the leaders seem to be Nazcor, as sort of the general of the Shadow Pokemon army, and then above him, Escade, the friendly mayor of Phoenix City, the oasis town at the heart of the region. The only city in the whole region with a Pokemon gym. It's supposed to be a hub of safety in an otherwise barren and unforgiving world. And yet, it's all just a front for his true form as Evice, the leader of Team Cipher. And working under them, because a lot of Team Cipher, there are the battlers, and there's the scientists, and then there's the admins and leader, the grunts of Team Snag'em, a whole separate evil organization that works for them. They are the brawn to Team Cipher's brains, going out into the region to quite simply steal Pokemon from other people. How is this allowed to happen? There is a small police presence in Pyrite Town, but the sheriff has his hands busy with everything going on there. There's a lot of criminal activity, and people battle with shadow Pokemon out in the open daylight. And of course, it's all about corruption. The corruption of Team Cipher goes all the way to the top. So Team Snag'em can just walk about and do as they like. In the Pokemon world, trainers who are powerful have a lot of influence over a particular region. In a region where there's not that many wild Pokemon and not a lot of options for a trainer to just catch powerful Pokemon and train them on an adventure, it does make sense that criminal organizations and syndicates would run the world. Team Snag'em steal Pokemon from other trainers and then give them to Team Cipher. Team Cipher then use their technology to close off the door to their heart, turn them into shadow Pokemon to give them back to the Snag'em Grunts, so that the Snag'em Grunts can then go back out into the world and steal more Pokemon to keep the most powerful shadow Pokemon for themselves. Evice in his final battle says that he has the perfect shadow Pokemon, his Tyranitar. But then 5 years later, of course, we get those events of Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, and we learn that the true perfect shadow Pokemon is this new project, Shadow Lugia. Oh, and there's also another head to this serpent. Greevil, the true puppeteer behind Evice, pulling the strings from his off-region base on the volcanic Citadark Isle. There is a whole shadow Pokemon base filled with some of the most powerful shadow Pokemon you'll find. All of the admins of Team Cipher as well have even been given shadow legendary Pokemon. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. And Evice himself uses, of course, Shadow Lugia. The final prize of each game, well, in Gale of Darkness, it's a Dragonite held by Mirror B. And if you can purify all the shadow Pokemon in Colosseum, you might be able to catch yourself a Ho-Oh. That might be more important in the theory section, but now it's time to move on from the world of Orre. And I should mention, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here. I'm going to look at some lore that we will almost never reference on the channel, but I think it's pretty crucial here. The dark Pokemon of the TCG, and even spin-offs like Pokkén Tournament. While clearly these different variations of dark, evil, shadow, and savage Pokemon are not designed with one another in mind with a consistent story at their heart, it's hard to ignore the similarities between these phenomena. So much so that by halfway through this video, you will also agree that even if there's not a true singular canon across the various canons of Pokemon, there is an intent by the writers of the stories that there is a right way to train Pokemon and a wrong way. But let's head back to the very beginning, where we understand that the motivations of any good Pokemon trainer is to go out into the world and to work alongside Pokemon. Yes, to use them in battle, but to grow together and to learn about yourself through Pokemon battling, to allow the Pokemon to gain experience, to grow and evolve. Something a shadow Pokemon might not be able to do because the experience is locked away behind the closed door of its heart. Let's have a look at some other examples. Dark Pokemon appear in the Pokemon trading card game. You might think the trading card game doesn't have lore, but actually in the early sets, there were a lot of really interesting blurbs that told us what the story and what the narrative were of these sets. The flavor for the Team Rocket set, it says this: the number of criminal incidents involving Pokemon has been on the rise. Some suggest it may have something to do with the rash of Pokemon kidnappings that have been occurring recently. Pokemon breeders believe that to properly raise and evolve a Pokemon, you have to treat it with love and attention. But what happens if a Pokemon isn't treated properly? Will it evolve differently? What's the secret behind this new threat to Pokemon and their trainers? Pokemon kidnappings, not treating your Pokemon properly, and a tie to Team Rocket. This is about to become very integral to the rest of the video. Let's have a look as well at the Neo Destiny set, which has nothing to do with Team Rocket, and introduces light Pokemon, as well as the reintroduction of dark Pokemon, and yet we get this. Pokemon wreathed in a mysterious light and Pokemon shrouded in darkness. What is their connection to Team Rocket? The mystery deepens and the adventure never ends. We see these light Pokemon. They appear as like counterparts to dark Pokemon, and in fact we see a lot of the same Pokemon that became dark in the Team Rocket set getting light versions. Look at that happy Machamp. And yeah, they use teamwork. A lot of their abilities rely around synergy with other Pokemon on the board. The dark Pokemon reappear, and despite Team Rocket not having a big role within the set, dark Pokemon are present. And while I'm sure you're already ready to type about another time shadow Pokemon have popped up more recently to do with Team Rocket, let's just spend a little bit more time in the past here, because in the Pokemon movie Forever, we see a member of Team Rocket, an admin called the Iron Mask Marauder, who uses a Dark Ball to convert the Pokemon he catches into more powerful but agitated versions of themselves. He He even manages to capture a Celebi doing this, and the Celebi gets dark rings around its eyes, almost like the form of it is beginning to change. This is actually referenced later on again in the TCG when dark Pokemon would reappear around the time of Generation 3 with EX Team Rocket Returns. This card was a couple sets earlier in Hidden Legends. We get the Dark Celebi card. The Iron Mask Marauder describes the Dark Ball as a bit of a technology that makes the Pokemon their highest level and makes them completely subservient to him. Around the exact same time in the animated series, Ash Ketchum is traveling through the Whirl Islands, and in this arc, he encounters a Lugia and its baby. The Lugia is being eyed up by Dr. Namba, a scientist of Team Rocket, and this scientist wants to capture the Lugia. I wonder for what reason. And his Pokemon are equipped with a bit of a technology called the Rage Crown. It's given to other Team Rocket grunts like Butch and Cassidy, and what does this Rage Crown do? It shuts off the door to the Pokemon's heart and makes them more rageful, making them stronger. There are a couple other examples of similar technologies too. In the Volcanion movie, we see Alva using his staff and his Mega Wave to transform a bunch of Pokemon into Mega Evolutions at once, but it seems to corrupt them and turn them into shadow Pokemon with glowing eyes. In the I Choose You movie, the rival character Cross, which by the way is the dumbest name I've ever seen in all of Pokemon, he's named Cross because he has a cross for his hair, and he's cross all the time. It's just painfully obvious, you know what I mean? My rageful opinions aside, Cross also has bad intentions, and those intentions through Marshadow corrupt the Rainbow Wing, and all the Pokemon in the surrounding area, well, purple eyes, shadowy auras, rageful, and attacking people. That sounds familiar. In the Detective Pikachu movie, we observe the R-Gas, a gas that confuses the Pokemon, makes them more rageful, makes them more likely to attack people, and gives them purple glowing eyes. This gas is extracted as a result of experimentations on Mewtwo, and to bring it back to Team Rocket a little bit here, while Team Rocket aren't directly mentioned in the Detective Pikachu movie, it is said that Mewtwo escaped from the Kanto region, suggesting that there's some canon tie there. If you really want to bring it full circle to the games, in Generation 2, outside Cerulean Cave, there is an item called the Berserk Gene, which is where you obviously catch Mewtwo, and the Berserk Gene does what? Well, it makes Pokemon more powerful, but ultimately makes it confused when it's using this item. The Berserk Gene, the R-Gas, which could stand for Rocket, or of course, Rage, the Rage Crown, and even when we look to some of the Rage-based moves in Pokemon, a Pokemon using the Dragon move Outrage will hit relentlessly, one after the other, until eventually it is confused and maybe hits itself with that confusion. Rage Powder, for example, puts a powder in the air that seems to make the opposing Pokemon rageful. Again, they can't make good choices. Instead, they just focus in on that Pokemon. And in Generation 1, the move Rage locked your Pokemon into that move. It couldn't do anything else. Even if it would be strategically better, the Rage blinds the Pokemon, sometimes into its own destruction. This is what Rage as a concept is in the world of Pokemon. It's hitting hard and fast and repeatedly, but not making good decision making, and sometimes even hurting yourself in the process. This is the core of the Shadow Pokemon philosophy. And while I'll talk about it more in the theory section, it makes sense that this is why Team Rocket would want to create a Pokemon like Mewtwo. Powerful, but uncontrolled, like a wildfire that burns everything in its path. That is, until they want to control it. There is another rogue Shadow Pokemon, and of course I have to talk about it, Shadow Mewtwo, that appears in Pokken Tournament. Corrupted by a Shadow Synergy Stone, a phenomena of the Ferrum region. There's really not a lot of lore there, but the Mewtwo has become corrupted and can now even Mega Evolve at will as a result of this corrupted stone and becomes a pure Shadow form. Shadow Lugia, Shadow Mewtwo, Shadow whatever that thing is. Corrupted and turned into shadow versions of themselves, they might be the most destructive force in the Pokemon world, able to achieve a power level beyond that of regular Pokemon. But let's bring it home with some more modern titles, starting off with spin-off, and then we're going to get to main series. Sure, Shadow Pokemon, Team Rocket. How have I not yet spoken about Pokemon Go? In Pokemon Go, it's kind of set in an alternate version of the real world, because that's where you catch Pokemon, but Team Rocket are still characters that appear in the game. A Shadow Pokemon caught in Pokemon Go has the signature move Frustration, which is a move that's more powerful the less friendly you are with your Pokemon. And then once it's purified, it gets returned, the opposite move with the opposite effect. Professor Willow outright confirms for us that Shadow Pokemon are the result of experimentations by Team Rocket, modifying and altering the Pokemon to become stronger. They are being caused frequent pain by their uncontrollable strength. This sounds similar to even at the Lake of Rage, there's that word again, where Team Rocket tried to use radio waves to force the evolution of Magikarp into Gyarados. Perhaps the unification of these projects means they could find Shadow Pokemon unevolved and force them to evolve through more unnatural means. Shadow Pokemon in the game are of course all surrounded by their regular shadowy aura. Apart from a few Pokemon, Shadow Mewtwo doesn't have that same kind of vibe because again, it's kind of special in the hierarchy of Shadow Pokemon. And then weirdly, once again, we get some Apex Shadow Pokemon in Lugia and Ho-Oh. They keep popping up, don't they? That'll be more important for the theory section, I'm sure. But Shadow Pokemon seems to be some kind of artificial phenomenon. Surely it can't exist naturally in the Pokemon world. And yet, it was only Cross's bad intentions through the Rainbow Wing that caused this Pokemon in I Choose You to become Shadow Pokemon. So there might be natural ways to achieve this phenomenon as well. In ancient history, the Pokemon are said to be more savage than Pokemon of other regions. And across the land are Alpha Pokemon. Now, I don't think these are quite the same thing as Shadow Pokemon, but maybe they are Dark Pokemon, or just less Shadow Pokemon. There seems to be like a gradient. On the journey of a regular Lugia to XD001, a Savage Lugia, that might be an option. That would be terrifying in Legends Arceus. Imagine that just barreling down out of the sky on you. These Pokemon don't have purple eyes, they have red eyes, although the depiction of Shadow Pokemon sometimes does have red eyes. They have this aura about them, and these Pokemon are far stronger than their regular counterparts. Even in Pokemon Legends ZA, do we get Alpha Pokemon again? And the rogue Mega Pokemon that seem to have unnaturally Mega evolved, not the way they should, maybe similar to the Volcanion movie. What do we get here? Pokemon that are rogue, berserk, rageful versions of their normally peaceful selves. This is a trope that's still continuing, even in the modern anime, where there is a gemstone called Recurium. Recurium seems to corrupt Pokemon, giving them an aura, making them rageful. It's all the same stuff. This is the same story that Pokemon has been telling since the very beginning. There are right ways to train Pokemon, and there are wrong ways to train Pokemon. I will talk more about Mega Evolution in my Mega Evolution deep dive video, because that is kind of the next big one that I'm going to do, and it might be my longest video ever. I'm very excited for it. But the Mega phenomenon rests an interesting point in all of this. We've seen corrupted Shadow Mega Pokemon, and the Pokedex entries for Mega Evolution and Pokemon Sun and Moon, they really take it in a whole different direction, talking about the pain caused to each of the individual Pokemon species. Almost all of them have a mention about how bad it is for them. And yet, it's also described as a phenomenon that occurs when there's a strong bond of trust between the human trainer and the Pokemon themselves. So what's going on here? More of that will be in the Mega Evolution video. Now, this trope is so common in Pokemon, I'm certain there are other little examples from other spin-offs or the manga, or just like other areas of the anime, or even in the main series that I've not quite thought about. But when you start pulling these threads together from all of these different elements of the Pokemon universe, you can start coming up with some pretty comprehensive theories. And so that's what the rest of this video is. The legends, what you, the community, every video I've ever seen on Shadow Pokemon and the Orre region, because we do not get to speak about the Orre region enough, including some of my own, and actually one of my favorite theories I've ever made that is so ridiculous it kind of got me into making Pokemon theories in the first place. It's one of my oldest, but it still holds up. It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's what the rest of this video is. The legends of Shadow Pokemon. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to call you out quickly as well. If you are this far into a video about the lore of Shadow Pokemon, one of Pokemon's more niche and unheard of topics, I just wanted to quickly say, you're awesome. I love you. This is the place for you. It's been amazing to see so many people show up and just be kind of Pokemon lore enthusiasts. I've loved talking about it in the comments with you, and I'm just blown away by the support that has been there this year. I just wanted to say that quickly. You are incredible, and welcome to this kind of Pokemon lore family. Right, let's do the legends now. Let's do those theories, including, yeah, one of my favorites. So I don't need to do much scene setting here, because I've kind of done it through the entirety of the video. Team Rocket is responsible for Shadow Pokemon, even in Pokemon Colosseum and Gale of Darkness. We don't see Team Rocket already have many references to them in Pokemon Colosseum and Gale of Darkness. It's all Team Snag'em, Team Cipher, and their leaders, Greevil in Gale of Darkness, and the mayor, Evice, who appears in Pokemon Colosseum. But that structure, that public-facing structure of having like some lower-level grunts who do the groundwork stealing Pokemon, then a rank of scientists, like a scientist class, and then above them, a public-facing important member of the community, Doesn't that sound a lot like Team Rocket? On top of that, we have Dark Pokemon as they appear in the card game, and of course, Shadow Pokemon as confirmed, the creators of Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Team Rocket mentioned again in Neo Destiny, even though Team Rocket has nothing to do with the set, but just because Dark Pokemon are there. The Dark Celebi owned by the Iron Master Marauder in the 4th Pokemon movie, and even the Rage Gas coming from Mewtwo, a creation of Team Rocket. The very fact that Mewtwo doesn't have the same kind of aura around it in Pokemon Go, even when Shadow as other Shadow Pokemon, suggests that maybe it does have some special role within the Shadow Pokemon hierarchy. And because Mewtwo is that uncontrolled wildfire that just uses raw power, well, it makes sense if the Berserk gene or R-Gas or Shadow formula came from experiments on Mewtwo by Team Rocket. But there's more. You remember I mentioned, of course, that thing earlier about the Whirl Islands and the Rage Crown that's created by a Team Rocket scientist who's trying to capture a Lugia? Of course, it's Project XD001. In the game continuity, it's very possible that Dr. Namba was successful in his journey. You might think Dr. Namba doesn't exist in the game continuity, so this is too much crossing the canons. And I'll admit, yes, it is. This is why I love this theory, because it's ridiculous. No one at Game Freak ever sat down and had this discussion. But it makes way too much sense when you consider this, that the Cipher admin and scientist who achieved the goal of creating Project XD001, converting that Lugia to a Shadow Lugia, was a scientist by the name of Lavrina. Lavrina has an interesting but kind of normal team. She's got a Love Disc and a Shadow Delcatty. And here's the connection. Dr. Namba is a reoccurring character in the Pokemon world, but not very often. And after his appearance in the Whirl Islands, only appears 3 times. Once in Sinnoh, which we won't worry about, but the other 2 times were in the Pokemon Chronicles episode, where he has tasked Butch and Cassidy with capturing a Love Disc and a Delcatty. Why? Why would Team Rocket have any interest in those Pokemon? Well, perhaps Dr. Namba needed them to give as rewards and as incentives to Lavrina, the Cipher admin who was going to achieve his goals of creating the ultimate rageful Pokemon. In addition to this, Dragon Masters 525 has suggested they might actually be related. This is because Naps is one of the Cipher team who works there and just refers to Lavrina as Big Sis or his sister. So I don't know, maybe it's a whole family unit that kind of works together. Either way, yes, it's crossing all the canons, but in doing so, you paint a picture that is scarily coincidental with that Delcatty and Love Disc if it's not connected. Another theory by the same user here, and I'll link to all these down below, is that Rui, the companion character of Wes, the player in Pokemon Colosseum, that Rui is related to Ash Ketchum. We're crossing canons here, but that's totally fine. It's something I've thought about too. See, in Agate Village, there is Egan, and Egan uses a Pikachu as his main ace. Egan is said to be a wise old Pokemon trainer, and at the time, at least, we had no idea when Pokemon Colosseum was set. Even now, we're not really sure. Is it possible it's set in some far future? Well, at that time, in the age of generations 1, 2, and 3, the shipping for Ash and Misty was the thing, and Rui does kind of look a little bit like Misty in her design. So perhaps Rui is the granddaughter of Ash and Misty now living their lives out in the Orre region, and what makes this a really fun idea is that, like I mentioned earlier, she can see Shadow Pokemon Aura, and Ash is an Aura Guardian. He has the ability to sense the aura within living creatures, within people and Pokemon, so perhaps that's a genetic trait that's passed down through him to her, as well as Misty's red hair. This next one is one I'm fond of, and one that kind of follows on from the last one we spoke about. The idea that the Orre region itself is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, that there actually has been some kind of apocalypse that's hit the region. This, by the way, has also been touched on by Dragon Master 525. He's got a whole playlist of Shadow Pokemon / Pokemon Colosseum or lore-interested videos. You should check those all out. They're amazing. But this is kind of my take on this, right? We know that there was an ancient civilization in the Orre region at one point because of the Orre Colosseum, simply called the Orre Colosseum. It is the Colosseum of the Orre region, and it's made of these ancient pillars that look a lot like the kind of architecture that you see around Spear Pillar and the Sinjo ruins. This is an ancient place. People used to live here, but not anymore, and the wild Pokemon of the region are largely gone. Ho-Oh flies overhead, but it's not until Gale of Darkness that wild Pokemon even start to return to the region. What is, of course, at the very center of the region is Mount Battle, an active volcano. So you see where I'm going with this? I think the Orre region, as any other region of the Pokemon world, used to be filled and teeming with Pokemon life until one day the volcano erupted. Now life survives only in the Oasis and really in Agate Village. There are a few other more modern towns that have begun to spring up since then, and now Pokemon are beginning to return to the Pokespots. But largely speaking, this region is both a desert and the home of criminal empires as a result of one thing: the savagery and brutality that comes with this being the closest we may ever get to a Pokemon post-apocalyptic game. In fact, at the beginning of Pokemon Gale of Darkness, there is a ship, the SS Libra, that's intercepted by Cipher and their Shadow Lugia to steal the ship filled with Pokemon. Why are there all these different species of Pokemon on the ship, and who are these Pokemon's trainers? We don't actually know. I think the cargo was the Pokemon. I think they were bringing Pokemon into the region to rewild the area, and Cipher couldn't have that, because that would give other trainers the opportunity to catch Pokemon and challenge them, and so they had to make their move, and that's why they stole the ship. Anyway, it's a side theory on the theory. So before we get back to the Shadow Pokemon themselves, I want to talk a little bit more about the Orre region and its mythology, because when else am I going to get to talk about this? And I do have a theory here all about Celebi and Agate Village. I mentioned earlier that Shadow Pokemon could be purified when the door to their heart is open, once they've had enough battling experience. But there is another way to get the door to their heart open. It's an item called the Time Flute. Celebi seems to be the Pokemon of Agate Village that purifies Pokemon. And the flute has obviously quite an interesting name, the Time Flute. And I think this might tell us a little bit about how the purification process is happening. I wonder if not only Shadow Pokemon, but Agate Village itself are a result of Celebi using its time-related powers to suspend the village in time, or rather to return the once forested area of Agate into a place where people could live again by Celebi, a guardian of the area and guardian of forests, and the Shadow Pokemon purification process and the Time Flutes that use the cry of Celebi, the voice of the forest as it's called in the 4th Pokemon movie, that what's happening to purify the Pokemon isn't just that the heart's being opened back up, but because the heart is open up, Celebi can use its time powers to remind the Pokemon, or just influence the Pokemon to be in the state they were at the point before they became Shadow Pokemon, with all the benefits and all the experience that they've got since. It's like a time travel Celebi therapy session. Now, when it comes to the other legendary Pokemon of the region, Mewtwo is nowhere to be found, but that makes sense. It wouldn't be tied to the mythology of the region because it's a modern-day Pokemon made by Team Rocket. Now, Ho-Oh and the legendary beasts Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, and of course then Lugia and the legendary birds Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno are all, apart from Ho-Oh, owned by high-ranking Cipher members. What's interesting about this is that the lore of these Pokemon are more often tied to the Johto region, and sometimes the Kanto region, though the lore on the birds is pretty scarce. However, what we do know about the legendary beasts is that they were created as the result of, well, something quite horrible happening at the burnt tower. When the tower burnt down and 3 Pokemon inside died, Ho-Oh used its powers to revive these legendary beasts. But what if they're not the only ones out there? What if the legendary beasts of the Orre region were revived as a result of something very similar happening in Orre? Perhaps this volcano erupting, killing 3 Pokemon that Ho-Oh uses its powers to resurrect, setting the legendary beasts free to roam the desert. Given the powers of Suicune, then, this would make sense as to how there can be pools of crystal clear water within the wasteland that people can use to sustain life. And then what about the legendary birds? Well, they're used on Citadel Isle. Now, the isle itself is also a ocean volcano lair, a second volcano in the Orre region just off the coast. 2 volcanoes between a forest where Celebi can be found. Does this not sound, I don't know, kind of a little bit like the layout of Johto? The 2 towers of Johto, and just south of them, what do you get? The Ilex Forest. Not only that, but the fact that Citadel Isle is itself an isle is similar to the depictions both in the Orange Islands, in the Pokemon movie 2000, where the birds all reside on their own island, and then Lugia kind of resides over them all, trying to keep balance. And even the depiction in Fire and Leaf Green of Naval Rock, an additional isle in the Sevi Island, where both Ho-Oh and Lugia roost. They don't just roost at the towers of Johto. So perhaps they used to roost on these twin volcano peaks, one in the sea for Lugia, and one, I guess, across the desert or on the land for Ho-Oh. The lore isn't ultra tight here, which is why it's just theory and speculation, but maybe this is something you want to finish in the comment section down below, because I think there's a story here. I think there's totally a relationship to all of these legendary Pokemon here that kind of makes sense for the history of the region. I would love so much to get a Legends Colosseum game, a Legends Orre game. Oh, I want to know about it all. Okay, one silly theory and then one serious one. The silly theory, older, and that guy, what's his name? Dakim? I mean, these guys are related, right? I don't know what that tells us. Not a whole lot. Probably just the Game Freak recycled the design. But in lore, in world, is it possible that the ancient hero of Hisui is actually the ancestor to Dakim? Yeah, probably not. Probably not. Okay, be on the lookout for the video on Mega Evolution. It's coming, I'm hoping, just after Legends EA drops, maybe a little bit after that. It's a big video with a lot in the works. But before we get to that, here's the serious one. If Shadow Pokemon are what happens when a Pokemon is corrupted for the goal of achieving power, but in order to achieve this power, you have to raise your Pokemon in properly and treat them bad, then what's the opposite to that? Well, that's where we get light Pokemon. That's what I was talking about in the TCG set with Neo Destiny. The destiny of a Pokemon is that it will become light or dark. But it's not just here. When you treat your Pokemon well in Pokemon Ami and Refresh and camping with them, Pokemon, their affection stat with you grows. And by growing that affection and nurturing these Pokemon properly, training them properly and spending time with them the right way, you find that Pokemon are capable of doing more than they should normally be able to do. Surviving hits that would otherwise faint them, landing critical hits that they wouldn't normally get, snapping out of various status conditions. If Shadow Pokemon is what happens when you treat a Pokemon wrong, then light Pokemon well raised, that's what happens when you treat a Pokemon correctly. They're more likely to achieve evolution, and perhaps in turn Mega Evolution as a result of having a bond with their trainer. Maybe there's a right way of Mega Evolving and a wrong way of Mega Evolving. Again, I'll have to cover that in the Mega Evolution video. And in fact, much how we've got pure Shadow Pokemon like Shadow Lugia and Mewtwo and, well, I don't know if it's a Pokemon, but whatever that thing is, well, that may be the case. We also have a pure light Pokemon. I think that's the Battle Bond Greninja. That's my theory. A Pokemon so well bonded with its trainer that it trusts it absolutely, completely. A Pokemon that is the ultimate version of what a light Pokemon would be. If you enjoy Pokemon lore deep dives like this, which clearly you do if you've got this far into the video, click the link at the top of the description to head on over to the Patreon to become a lore keeper and support what I do, as so many of you already have. Thank you, everyone, and look forward to a mega lore deep dive.